A wildfire burns down the town of Paradise, California on November 8, 2018. And takes with it the home of Mike and Holly Ann Verbeda, destroying what they say had been a dream of a life. They and their 2 children escaped with their lives, but they say they lost virtually everything else.
You just don't understand how, when your whole world is completely destroyed, how difficult it is to start from scratch.
The hardest part is the people, the connections that you won't have again.
Losing connections with 86 people who died in the fire here in Paradise. Losing connections with people who've lost everything and moved away. How many have left? 25,000 people are estimated to have been burned out of their homes. Only 5,000 remain after what is considered the most deadly and destructive wildfire in California history. Mike Verbeda didn't lose just his home. He lost his business that also burned to the ground.
This is what I used to do. I used to make dentures, removable partials, anything that came out.
That business manufacturing dentures and supplying them to dentists in town. Dentists who are no longer here because their business is also burned to the ground. As a result, Mike, at his age now, says it's too late to start his business over again.
Because I'm middle-aged now, I'm 46 years old.
He and his wife, Holly Ann, and their kids now live squeezed together with Mike's parents, whose home here was one of the few structures in Paradise not completely burned to the ground, though it was badly damaged. Up these stairs is a very small living space they all share in an attic up under the roof, because much of the rest of the house needs to be repaired.
So now we're just waiting on insurance funds.
But the problem is, to repair the home, it'll cost $400,000. And Mike's parents' insurance companies say it will only pay $100,000 of that.
The insurance company said that it was about $100,000 in damage. And when we had a contractor that was recommended to us, he was over $400,000 to repair this house.
Mike's parents, who came here to Paradise from Croatia decades ago, say they have also lost just about everything. For example, they owned and operated 9 rental properties in Paradise that all burned to the ground. And now they say their insurance company is refusing to cover the costs of repairing the only place they have left to live.
They're not very helpful, although they said we are here to help you. But they are not. They are just for their own pockets. They are not people's friend.
Others who they say are not their friends are outsiders coming here daily to profit from the town's tragedy, such as real estate companies buying up vacant lots here for pennies on the dollar, to various cleanup services and construction teams arriving here to cash in, they say, on other people's misery.
Oh, yeah. I learned quickly that disaster is a huge moneymaker. There's huge profit to be made. Somebody making an enormous amount of money off of the grief of others.
The Verbeda family is just one example of thousands of families impacted by wildfires across California in recent years. In 2017, 1.3 million acres burned throughout the state. In 2018, even more, 1.8 million acres incinerated. The amount of money lost here in California to wildfires in recent years is breathtaking. In 2017, $85 billion in damages. In 2018, $400 billion in losses. State officials say the losses include damage to homes and businesses, to cars lost, jobs and wages lost, farm and crop losses,
The fire's about to jump the road.
highway and other infrastructure damage, highway closures, school closures, and the costs of power outages to businesses and individuals. Losses from wildfires that also include costs to manage evacuations and increased insurance premiums throughout the state, firefighting costs, flight cancellations and delays, as well as current and long-term residual health effects on those impacted by dirty air. But finally, there would be some fire relief in 2019. Far fewer fires across the state, only 260,000 acres burning. Why fewer fires? Officials here say it's because there was more rainfall and snowpack in California's mountains in 2019. Also, fire departments have learned to more quickly evacuate people in harm's way, and more fire crews and aircraft are on standby. And some fires have ignited in regions already previously burned, so there's been less brush or fuel that causes larger fires. Still, California is facing major problems and more losses, due in many cases to fires being started by faulty transmission lines during high winds, causing equipment to spark or explode and set off fires. Wildfires sweeping through towns like Paradise, blamed on faulty transmission lines belonging to the nation's largest utility company, Pacific Gas and Electric, or PG&E. PG&E is facing so many lawsuits and $50 billion in damage claims that it has filed for voluntary bankruptcy. And in an effort to prevent future fires, PG&E has resorted to deliberately turning off power grids altogether during dry, windy, and hot conditions. That in one instance left an estimated 2 million people without power in major urban areas of the Bay Area near San Francisco. And PG&E says it may continue this strategy of shutting down power for years to come, leaving utility customers understandably upset with PG&E for both the power shutdowns and the faulty transmission lines and equipment responsible for so many fires in the first place, says company spokesperson Matt Nauman.
First off, we want to say, as we have, that how deeply sorry we are that our equipment was involved in these fires.
In the meantime, PG&E says it has launched a major new effort to repair and fireproof or harden transmission equipment and power lines in high-risk fire zones, including trimming back thousands of trees from around these lines and equipment. And here in San Francisco at PG&E's headquarters is a new state-of-the-art command center called the Wildfire Safety Operations Center to help PG&E better detect and monitor fires in the field with the use of hundreds of cameras it has positioned across its vast service area in Northern California, and passing on information about fires to firefighters and first responders, says the Operations Center's John Bruckbauer.
The alert wildfire cameras, we have a couple hundred of these that are installed all throughout our service territory. All the team here actually have full access to log into the proxy server and pan, tilt, zoom, and take over the camera. So a good example is once we see something pop up on the fire detection satellite system, the analyst can then log in to that nearest camera location, move that camera to that area, and zoom in to see if there's any smoke, if there's any response going on there, to see if there's any credible threat. And we also share this with our first response agency partners.
PG&E says it has also increased inspections of its transmission lines and towers in the last 2 years.
We did unprecedented inspections, more than 700,000 individual components, transmission towers, distribution poles.
In 2020, PG&E also agreed to plead guilty to 84 counts of involuntary manslaughter and 1 count of unlawfully starting a fire at the transmission tower responsible for the Paradise fire in 2018.
That's your childhood house?
That's the childhood house, yeah.
Right here was my house.
Longtime Paradise resident Gary Patrick says the key to preventing future wildfires will be clearing excess underbrush and thinning dense forests in California's mountains.
I grew up here. I went to school here. I learned to hunt and fish here. These mountains are my home. I know every inch of this place.
Now you look, we're really getting in some burn here.
Most every inch of it, he says, overgrown with thick, dried underbrush and excess trees that should have been cleared, he says, long ago, but instead became the fuel that fed the monster blaze that burned down Paradise.
All the brush must have been 20 feet high, choking off the roads.
Patrick says the real experts on preventing wildfires, of course, are the firefighters tasked with battling them or preventing them every year. We recently sat down with California's top firefighter, Chief Tom Porter, the director of the state's fire department known as CAL FIRE.
CAL FIRE is currently the second largest fire department in the United States, behind New York City. And we have well over 8,000 firefighters. Out of the last 5 years, in 2017 and 2018, we were really tested. We were stretched to the absolute max. Wildland firefighting is one of the most dangerous jobs there is.
CAL FIRE has access to and operates a robust set of firefighting assets that can be dispatched around the state. Among them, more than 1,000 fire engines or trucks, 61 bulldozers, 23 1,200-gallon air tankers, 12 Super Huey helicopters, and 17 air tactical planes. Chief Porter agrees that reducing the amount of dried brush and trees around communities, what's known as fuel reduction, is paramount to preventing fires in the first place. He says the state of California has begun increasing CAL FIRE's manpower and machinery in the field to manage and clear underbrush from California's forests and surrounding communities, thanks, he says, to a new budget of $1 billion that will be spread out over the next 5 years.
This is the biggest budget for fuels reduction and fire hazard reduction that the state of California has ever put forward.
CAL FIRE field spokesperson Rick Carhart gives us an up-close and personal look at CAL FIRE crews burning off excess underbrush in controlled burns done during winter months in California.
What we're doing is we're removing fuel. What starts fires, what keeps fires burning, what makes a fire bigger, what makes a fire grow. This area has for years been way too overgrown with brush, too many trees. If you had seen what this looked like before, the area that we're standing in right now, you couldn't see 15 feet. And so this now looks almost like a park, where you've got the appropriate number of trees per acre, you've got very little undergrowth. And so from here on out, what we need to do is we need to keep it looking like this.
CAL FIRE Chief Tom Porter says climate change has become a huge factor responsible for an increase in so many catastrophic fires in recent years.
In California, we are living with climate change. As the climate changes, as we start to see more and more of these fires happening across the landscape drying out, we're going to continue to have battles on our hand from here to as far as I can see in the future. We've been honing our craft for 100 years, and we're really good at it. It's still, Mother Nature has, and it continues to give us challenges that we can't control.
One thing that can be controlled are California's utility companies' continuing efforts to harden and fireproof electricity transmission and distribution systems. Systems that were not built for the changing weather and climate conditions that are intensifying wildfire risks that are forecast to worsen over the next few decades, says Michael Wara, who directs the Climate and Energy Policy Program at Stanford Woods Institute for the Environment. Wara says PG&E's temporary power shutdowns or blackouts to prevent transmission lines from igniting fires are blackouts that have been effective, but are at the same time costing California's economy billions of dollars each year when businesses, particularly in the food and restaurant industries, lose power during blackouts.
They cost in the neighborhood of $10 billion in lost economic output. That's something like a third of the growth in GDP that occurred last year. So it's a significant impact on California. There's a lot of pressure not to turn the power off, but when we don't turn the power off, we tend to have really catastrophic fires.
And Wara recently testified at the U.S. Senate how important it is for the federal government to spend more of its federal U.S. Forest Service budget to better manage and clear federally owned land in California that accounts for almost 75,000 square miles in the state, much of it in high-risk fire zones.
And right now, too much of the forest budget in the federal government is intended for, or in effect is spent, on firefighting rather than fire prevention. So we need to do much more to coordinate between the state and the federal government and just spend more money managing our lands better.
Paradise fire victims Mike and Holly Ann Verbata know all too well the pain of losing everything to a wildfire.
There's no place to go, so.
Holly Ann has remained unemployed since her job as a registered nurse went away when the town's hospital burned to the ground.
I see my friends on Facebook, and it kind of makes me sad. I wish I could be there with them. I had a hard time even changing my Facebook status as saying that I'm not an employee anymore, or even just changing my home address on my phone.
And she says her husband Mike, losing his business, has taken quite a toll on him too.
I see him wishing that he could continue, supporting us and being the breadwinner, but right now he's in limbo too with everything. And
there's a lot of people probably wondering, why wouldn't you just move after a fire like this?
I mean, it just comes down to this is your community, and you have so many ties to an area that just leaving is not really feasible for a lot of people. And you think about where else would you go? This is your home.
Also lost in the fire, says Holly Ann, was her personal collection of books.
I had thousands, maybe 10,000 books. This is the one scrap of paper I found from all my books. It's from my favorite book, actually, interestingly enough. A poetry book by Alfred Noyes called The Torchbearers, ironically enough. The poem says, "Light the torch once more, make all things new, build a new heaven and earth and save the world."
Whether these wildfires can ever be tamed remains a question mark.